Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Kingsman: The Golden Circle. I think when you think of any good sequel, whether it be, let's say, Empire Strikes Back or Terminator 2, the reason those sequels are good is because there is a theory. They looked at how they made the first film and why it made a classic, and made a theory based on that of where to take those characters and what to do with that world. Sometimes playing almost against the original movie in a lot of ways. The reason Empire Strikes Back is a huge classic isn't because it's like super darker and it's a bummer ending, it's because it plays in juxtaposition to the original film. Same with Terminator 2. You take, the bad guy is suddenly a good guy, it's a twist on it, it's a different take on it, and it's something to do with the characters from the original. Kingsman: The Golden Circle doesn't do that. It kind of does the normal boring sequel thing of having everybody do sort of the same adventure again and not really do anything with it, which is a shame because the original Kingsman had a great theory behind it. It had a lot of great things it was saying, particularly about class, not just in the world but specifically in the UK, with the character of Eggsy coming up through the Kingsman and how he is viewed by these other people because he is poor and lower class versus the higher class people, and the class issues that happen all throughout the world, and it worked throughout the theme of the whole movie. Kingsman: The Golden Circle doesn't have a theme like that. It certainly has some interesting political ideas and socio-economical ideas within it that it could definitely play with and make a theme, but none of that connects to the character of Eggsy and his story, the Kingsman falling apart, anything like that. In fact, I couldn't even tell that this took place after the first film. There's no ramifications to, almost everyone who's rich and powerful's head exploding from the first one. It would be interesting to live in that world and see how things had changed since that, but there's like no indication that anything had changed. I know a lot of what the Kingsmen do is supposed to be undercover and stuff, but there was like no indication that anyone knew. And there's several times where they have like fights, particularly in the beginning sequence where they have this big fight like out in the streets of London, and it's like, that's a cool sequence, but it's like, I thought you guys were like in secret and nobody like knew about you and stuff. Like, it's kind of hard to hide that at that point. It cares about expanding the world, but it doesn't care about the rules of that world and the theory behind the rules of that world and playing with that theory and making something original with it. I feel like I should expect that from Matthew Vaughn because he did a lot with his weird amalgamation of what the original Kingsman: The Secret Service was. And it almost felt like the culmination to his filmmaking career, having a character go through like this training to become this massive hero, and we've never seen him do a sequel. And there's always been this like, well, if he got to direct Kick-Ass 2 or the second X-Men movie or the weird version he wanted to do, it would have been this and it would have been so much cooler. And now we finally get the sequel to kind of his ultimate version of this thing that he's been making from Kick-Ass 2 to X-Men First Class to the first Kingsman, and I think I'd expect better, but in the end you just get a normal kind of sequel where they're trying to recapture all the moments and they're not really saying anything or picking up on the issues or expanding upon the issues that they brought up in the original film. The Kingsman sequel kind of takes all the ideas from the original Kingsman that your dumb friend at work really liked, like the crazy action sequence in the church and all the blood and the crazy action sequences mainly, and just plays off of those. If you know someone who liked the first Kingsman on a pure like spectacle service level, then they'll love the Kingsman: The Golden Circle. But if you notice there were deeper things within it, then you won't like this because there isn't. I mean, there's certainly interesting ideas. The whole idea of the president played by Bruce Greenwood, I guess, is a commentary on Trump. Trump hasn't been in office long enough that I'm pretty sure this film would have been the same way if Hillary was elected or not. I don't know if they did reshoots or something like that. I haven't found any information on that, but that was actually a really interesting plot line, and regardless of you support Trump or not. It was also interesting, a lot of Fox News in here. I know this was a 20th Century Fox production. I didn't notice they were saying anything with it, or he just thought it was funny that he could make Fox News anchors do parts in his movie. The whole idea, the whole like plot of this is sort of similar to the original. Who Julianne Moore plays is this character named Poppy, who is a huge drug dealer and deals cocaine, cannabis, heroin, ecstasy, and all sorts of stuff. And if anyone uses that, they will be put with this like thing, their face will get all blue and veiny. They will eventually have a virus which will kill them. And the only way she will give everyone in the world the antidote is if the president legalizes drugs, but only in the US, despite the fact that she did this all over the world. I know, right? That's a little weird. Even though there are characters in England, this is mainly an English movie, a lot of the main characters are English, but they're like super concerned about the president. Figure that one. I don't know. The prime minister has nothing to do with this movie, which is weird. You'd think like maybe like each country would make a different deal and like that would sort of make some sort of sense, but no, they don't do that. It's just about the president. And it does some interesting commentary on America, particularly the idea of the statesman. I like the cliche of an American Kingsman version where they're wearing like, you know, cowboy hats and own like a whiskey brand and stuff. I actually really like when other countries like do American stereotypes. I'm like, man, we fucking deserve that shit. I like the cliche of that. I like the idea that they have Jeff Bridges and Channing Tatum in it, but then don't really have them in it, and then have Pedro Pascal in most of it. It's really his movie. It's like, who of the statesmen is the cheapest to be in this movie? Oh, Pedro Pascal. No offense or anything, but you're not Jeff Bridges or Channing Tatum. So they'll be in a little bit, and then he'll be in a lot of it, really. Also, how did you have Julianne Moore, Jeff Bridges, and a bowling alley and fail to make a good Big Lebowski joke? I just like, all those things are in this movie. Julianne Moore is in a bowling alley, Jeff Bridges is not. But you have these three people and you seemingly do nothing with them. Congratulations, I guess. Oftentimes, like, these ideas in this film never connect, and you know, it has some interesting things about it. I think you could pick up on cool, interesting ideas within this film, but it just doesn't really want to connect them in a way to make something as an overarching story the way the original one did. I've noticed there's like sort of a lot of shit talking of the original because of this film, and I think this film is doing what most crappier or lesser sequels do, is they make the idea of the original worse. And the thing that the original did is it took all these things of like Roger Moore Bonds and Pierce Brosnan Bonds, and they took like these kind of like really like spectacle kind of Bond things and made them about something and did something with them. And I think that's really amazing and really cool. But in effect, what they did is they took the original, which did something you never saw from that kind of a Bond movie, still made it fun and also saying something, and made the second one like just an average sort of Bond movie. I mean, I've heard people compare it to Die Another Day and Pierce Brosnan stuff, and I'm not going to disagree with you. I'd probably say maybe World Is Not Enough, because that's in the tolerable ones. I don't know, it's not Goldeneye, you know, it's just in the Bond movies where you're like, ugh, when's the next one? It feels like that. It just feels like a big blockbuster with a lot of money. It makes me think Matthew Vaughn isn't the great director we thought he was, because when you think of great directors, they all knew how to make a good sequel at least once. Hey, Spielberg screwed some stuff up, but you know, Last Crusade was pretty cool. I just think they like didn't know what to do with Kingsman and what they were saying with Kingsman. They just took it on in a very like, hey, these guys make stuff explode and have cool action sequences and violence and stuff, and let's bring up the anal sex joke way too many times. I did even like the Elton John cameo, which was a little more than a cameo. Like, he's in this a lot. It's kind of entertaining to a certain degree. I liked the first Kingsman so much, and I was expecting to be sort of, you know, swept up and have this like fun, entertaining blockbuster. And maybe I overliked that film to a certain degree, and maybe I understand why critics are like shitting on the original now after seeing this, because while I was watching it, even the opening car sequence, which is amazing, I was just like sitting there like thinking like, oh man, I really need to get this one thing done and that thing. And then every time I see that with the movie, I go, maybe I'm too old, maybe I have this kid now, and clearly I've lost my eye and I can't fall into an amazing movie. And then I realized after a little bit, I go, wait, no, this movie's not great. I'm distracted because this movie is not pulling me in. I did not think that when I saw Good Time, for example. I didn't even really think that much when I saw it. But in this, like, I felt like I was just watching a disposable, blockbuster, stylized, crazy movie. And Matthew Vaughn was more showing off his, like, technical direction, but it ended up looking, like, worse than the original, all the action sequences. There wasn't one action sequence that I was like, whoa, that's crazy. It was just a lot of me going like, whoa, those are special effects. I love Taron Egerton. I wish Colin Firth wasn't in this, which is another huge problem with it. I actually like seeing Emily Watson, who's sort of in this for a little bit. It has a lot of fun still. It feels like I'm seeing the crappier summer sequel than I am seeing a franchise that knew how to take it on and do something with that. And I think that is what separates great sequels from just like, oh, they made a second one, you know, we should probably watch that because you like the first one. And then you watch and go, it's not as good. And this this is like in the long line of sequels that you're just like, they're not as good. This is just like a typical normal kind of disappointing sort of sequel that's fine and funny and has some cool ideas, and you can discuss with your friends like, oh yeah, but if they stuck to this thing, but wouldn't it have been cool if Kingsman 2 was this and all that stuff. This is that. It's like Smokey and the Bandit 2 or something. Oh, it's like the same. It's the same thing. There's an evil person who's gonna, kill a lot of people and wreck the world. And in this, it like doesn't even make sense, because it's like, why would you try to kill all your customer base? Like, wouldn't that work? And how are you like that successful of a drug dealer? That part I didn't really get. And it's like sort of playing almost like we're getting close to like Adam West Batman territory with the Julianne Moore character, which I sort of liked, but it also like didn't feel like they had a point to it the way they did with Samuel L. Jackson's character. It's not so much the performance, it's more of the writing. Honestly, I didn't think the writing was very good. It felt like too many different crazy subplots and stories, and it felt like a sequel where they thought they were coming up with ideas that they could use later in later films. But I'm sitting there with this film thinking like, where's any of this going really? I think what this film learned is something that James Bond is a franchise that's had a ton of films. It's an unprecedented film series in the history of cinema. It's pretty much like James Bond and Godzilla. There aren't really that many franchises that keep making sequel after sequel after sequel. And there's been more failures at doing that than there have been successes. And those are huge iconic characters. And when I think of James Bond, I think of several good movies going through decades and so forth that I like. And they found ways to reinvent itself and come up with new ideas and have, good movies that both worked theoretically and worked, within the character and the whole thing that they were trying to do. Kingsman being, a sort of a send-up of James Bond and send-up of spy movies, in particular kind of the Roger Moore, Pierce Brosnan thing, kind of falls in line with all the films that try to do James Bond stuff and then fail into making a franchise. It doesn't really understand how to make a franchise. You need the second one to be substantial, so I will want to come back. After this, I'm kind of lukewarm on the idea, frankly, because it doesn't feel like the director knows what to do with it. I think there are ideas and there are ways you probably could have done something with it, like, the whole idea of new money and having Eggsy deal with the fact that now he used to be working class, and what does it mean to be upper class, particularly in a world where most of the upper class was killed for being too greedy and selfish and excluding themselves, in a world that would have been cleansed of the lower class and that division of the basically 1% of 99% in the fictional world that he lives in. But instead, he just kind of walks on and they go, hey, you saved the world. And you go, yeah, I did. Yeah. And wouldn't the guy who's president now have been one of those people? Or was he? How did you just drop that? As the film went on, I was like, they'll make some reference, like, oh, all of Congress died, or like, oh, too bad we don't have that thing that rich people did. And in this, they're like, yeah, no, he's gonna marry a princess. I know her family was spared, or it's like her family the good one, or do they hate her family? It's just like, their ideas here, and they don't get into them. What they're more interested in is having electroshock lassos and like crazy action sequences with crazy hands and having, cool music with it and trying to recreate things from the original. They're not interested in doing something with these characters, really. They're not planning this out for a franchise. They're just acting like if they just recreate the moments over and over again, we'll sort of be cool with it. But when you think of the great James Bond stories, really, they just continue the character and put him in a different situation. And that's why we still talk about From Russia with Love and Goldfinger. They're different characters, they're different adventures, and this one didn't even really do that. I kind of understand if it was like a different adventure that sort of tried to recapture the same things and do the typical sequel. It doesn't even do that. It's just like trying to really recreate the original in too many ways and not really understanding the political and socio-economical bite that the original really had, which honestly, like, without it is why this film is worse, and probably on a pure fundamental screenwriting storytelling level, the fact that they got that to connect with both the Eggsy story to the overall story with the villain. In this film, it's like Eggsy's doing this one thing and he's got his girlfriend and Colin Firth's back and there's like a drug thing and I'm just explaining it in like a weird way, and like it looks like a big expensive haphazard sequel. They're not doing anything or saying anything with that budget, and that was the cool thing. They found a way to make that excess of James Bond, particularly an era that isn't that well loved. Both Pierce Brosnan and Roger Moore, for the most most part. I mean, Goldeneye and Spider Love Me are great, but the rest of them are not so great. And made it and gave it meaning in ways that no one thought you could really do, while also being subversive and being gory and interesting, all these things, and really like actually, feeling with the character in certain regards. I think the scene with the dog had more feeling than anything he had with his fiance, and the creepy thing with like the glove thing that goes in the girl's vagina. There's certainly weird stuff, but nothing as interesting and as crazy. Matthew Vaughn made the same movie a lot of different times, and we all sort of wondered what would happen if he made a sequel to that movie. And now that I've seen it, I kind of think he was probably maybe a lot emptier than I originally thought. I thought he could do something more with it. Maybe he needs like 2 more tries so he can get what he got from the original Kingsman, since he had Kick-Ass, First Class, and then Kingsman, basically doing the same plot of the hero's journey, becoming a person. If he had that, I think he could have, maybe if he has 3 of these, by the time he gets to the 4th Kingsman, if he directs all those, we'll get a really sensational one. But until then, this just falls under the guise of all the films that try to do these long-lasting franchises and fail because they don't understand what theoretically to do with these characters in the story after the first one, making this less of a comment and send-up of Bond into just being a big, expensive, nonsense kind of Bond movie, which most people watch once and just forget about, making this not the kind of surprise, interesting franchise that nobody saw coming, and making it just frankly expected, which is probably the more expected thing for most sequels to unexpected hits to do, and that's probably the most disappointing thing about this, and the most predictable thing about Kingsman: The Golden Circle. So if you've seen Kingsman: The Golden Circle and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.